Good morning, good afternoon, good night to all the people joining these sections. Welcome everyone to the sections on dry overweight, food choices, and nutrition transition. My name is Nam, and I am chairing this section. The aim of the section is to contribute to the public health debate around obesity prevention at an early age. So this section combines papers across several countries in the global south that are in different stages of their nutrition transitions. We have Juan Caro from University of Luxembourg on grandparents and parental time investment and child obesity in Chile. Matthias Rieger of Erasmus University Rotterdam on an information provision RCT for mitigating child obesity in Vietnam. Trang Nguyen from Wageningen University on nurturing towards a healthier food choice also in Vietnam, and Margarita Mecheva from Erasmus University on nurtures on food choice in Indonesia. Just some housekeeping information. Presenter has a maximum 8 minutes. I will signal you when you have 1 minute left and when your time is up. And discussion has a maximum 3 minutes giving your comments. So after we complete all 4 presentations, I will open up floor to comments and questions from the audience. So you may write your questions in the chat box. So now I would like to welcome Juan Caro for the first presentation. Juan, the floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Thank you, Nam. Okay, I know we test this, but audio is okay, screen is okay. Thanks. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Matthias and Nam, for organizing this session. It's really, really interesting. And I'm gonna try to do a little bit of an overarch perspective and hopefully try to contextualize why we care and why we do these interventions, why we want to try to prone some sort of a signal towards parents and what effects they can have in the way that the interaction affects child development. Obviously, this is a running title and it's a shared work with my colleagues here, Berman and Marcela Parada. And there you go. Okay, so just trying to be very, very quick. There is some prior work on what is the relationship between intra-household arrangements and the development of children. In many cases, especially in countries that are in the track of development, most parents have to choose how they allocate their time. They have to make labor force decisions, and that means that in many cases where there is no standard universal provision of childcare services, there will be intergenerational arrangements to either provide standard childcare, but also to be more involved in the developmental process. And in some countries, that level of involvement will be quite strong because parents will actually be cohabitating in multi-generational households, which is more common actually in places like Asia and Latin America and in Africa. What we do know so far is that there might be interesting trade-offs. In general, the presence of additional adults helps to extend labor force for women, but at the same time can create very strong coordination issues that arise for having multiple caregivers trying to figure out what's going on and how to provide for their children. And the bottom line is that in general, there haven't been too many studies that incorporate all these decisions because of lack of data. You really need a very heavy data set that has a lot of information tracking what's going on inside the household, but also what's the developmental path in order to understand these choices. And what I will be presented to you today is very preliminary work using a census type data that comes from the Chilean government. and essentially measures every children that goes to pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade, as long as they don't go to a private school, which represents a very small fraction of the total school market at this stage. And the idea is try to understand and to disentangle all these choices. So we're going to be looking at female labor supply, choices in terms of schooling, but also time investments from the parents, fertility and cohabitation, both between the parents, but also with other family members, and the total number that caregivers are directly taking an involvement in the parenting process by kin. So we're going to separate grandparents from other family members, from the mom and the dad. And in terms of outcomes, we're going to be looking at body mass index as a measure of nutritional health, and a measure of social-emotional development that closely relates to sterilizing behavior. We're also going to be incorporating beliefs, which is obviously very important when we're trying to solve this dynamic allocation process. In particular, we're going to be looking at self-efficacy and the parenting style, where this parenting style is going to be a measure of how authoritarian the parenting practices are. And in order to account for endogeneity, the method that we're using is a discrete factor approximation. It's a random effect that it gets approximated with mass points, and then this allows us to incorporate both fixed individual heterogeneity and also time-varied heterogeneity. The upshot. In general, the parents have a very meaningful effect on the quality of time investments, meaning that the parenting practices become less authoritarian, and parents feel they have more self-efficacy by involving more adults. And the quantity of time investments also increases. Needless to say, also there is an increase in the likelihood of being in the labor market. Unfortunately, there seems to be a negative direct effect on the productivity of child inputs. In particular, there seems to be a negative effect on the child's BMI, especially if the grandparents are in the household. And so far, in the full sample, we don't seem to find anything in terms of social-emotional development relative to who is involved. From a direct effect, obviously, there's going to be, as you can see in the model, a lot of indirect effects that can have a positive or a negative effect, impact overall. Just going to go very quickly through the data. We're using, like I said, a census type data. There is some attrition, and we can talk into more detail, but essentially when you compare the longitudinally matched data versus just the data that we're using for estimation, there is really not much difference, although we are obviously controlling for attrition as well in the full model. And the framework is very, very simple for the people that are familiar with how these models of skills development works. We're going to have a dynamic of production skills, and we're going to have a very simple problem that parents are solving, where they're choosing how much time do they allocate to work, leisure, and parental investments. And also they have resources that are limited, and they're looking into this balance between present consumption and what's the ultimate developmental path of the children, and they solve the intertemporal problem. This is a little bit of the timing, so you get a sense of what we're looking at. We're going to be estimating this in 2 periods. So parents get into the information of the previous period to make all of these decisions, then we see what's the outcome for the kids, we see the quality of the investments, and then we move to the next period. Okay. This is just so you get an idea of how we estimate it. The only part that matters here is that we have the conditional likelihood for each mass point, and then we estimate the mass points together to get this heterogeneity. And just to go very quickly the results, as you can see, each pair of columns represents each of the outputs that we care that we're looking at. And then in each row, you have dummy variables for who is being a caregiver and whether there is cohabitation or not. And for our perspective, what we found that it was the most interesting part here is that having more caregivers definitely increases the amount of time investment that is dedicated. Think about these changes in percent because it's logged to dummies. But at the same time, the presence of these additional caregivers, especially if they're in the household, increases the BMI. So there is a trade-off here in terms of coordination between having more time that is being contributed positively to child's development. This more time also comes with a better quality, but at the same time, we see these increases of BMI. I wouldn't really call this a puzzle. There is, like I said before, price information in terms of coordination. And the part that I found very, very interesting is that it gets worse if the grandparents are in the household, which means that the coordination gets worse to the extent that it has to be more bargaining within the household relative to just counting with this additional support, but the purse outside of the household. There's a bunch of an extra steps that we need to take. So I'm looking forward to Marcos, and I'm looking forward to everyone comments on our work. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Juan. Now, discussion is Marcos. Now, Marcos, your turn.
So thank you very much, Juan, for this interesting presentation. I like very much the paper, especially the idea behind it is very interesting. It's great that you had the chance to test it with longitudinal data. So I will give you a few comments regarding your work. I only have 3 main points. First, regarding the strengths and contribution of the paper, I said I think it's a very well motivated and clearly identified research gap that you are researching here. Of course, what helps here a lot is the rich data source you have. So you nearly have all children in public schools in Chile. So that's a great asset there for this research. Also, I had the feeling that you have had very strong foundations in terms of the analysis you do, in terms of the theory behind this, which is very standard theories that you check here, and also the empirical model. So yeah, I see you put a lot of efforts there, put in very detailed analysis of these 2 aspects. I also found very intuitive results behind your explanations. So how the role of grandparents' involvement and how they help the primary caregivers. So I think the results behind this are very intuitive in that sense. And then what I'm wondering is something that you didn't mention, but I saw in your larger recorded presentation, is exploring the mechanisms behind this negative effect of the grandparents as caregivers on BMI, for instance. So what's behind there in between these decisions arrangements and then the stochastic realizations, which are BMI and social emotional development. For instance, what happens in terms of the diet that the grandparents provide to the kids. I know you cannot observe perhaps this data, but there is something you can explore there, or at least mention some potential explanations there. And also the influence of or the lack of physical activity that where the parents are present having physical activity with the child. I saw in your data that it is very low, the rate of parents who do physical activity with the child. So perhaps that can explain something there in your results. And then leading to some suggestions, as I said, perhaps explore other channels on top of the ones you have on your mind. I know you have 2 potential channels there. And I know there is a lot of evidence on parenting styles and the influence of food and children's food behaviors. So, and especially like influence on self-regulation of the kids in terms of how they approach food choices. And also the other point that I mentioned, and how physical activity can play a role here. And the last I want to say is in the way you present your results in your paper, perhaps you can order your outcomes in a different way or more structured there. For instance, perhaps divide between primary and secondary outcomes. I know your primary outcomes are BMI and social emotional development, but then you put more explanation or details on the other outcomes. Sometimes that's the feeling I have, or perhaps structure between outcomes related to the parental arrangements, and outcomes for stochastic realizations, which perhaps can help to give more structure in the way you present your results. So that's all I can have for you now, Juan.
Thank you, Marcos. Juan, you have any burning response?
I just need 30 seconds because this is really interesting. We have very informal data that was collected in a subset of schools relative to the food meal program. It seems that grandparents tend to give double meals, either breakfast or lunch. That seems to be one of the mechanisms. About a quarter of the children, especially boys, get double meals. So there is a coordination issue there. And yes, in general, in Chile, the levels of physical activity for both adults and children are very, very low. Unfortunately, this is more of anecdotal data, but we will use it to support our idea. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, Juan. Now we are moving to the second presentation. Matthias, take it away.
Sorry. So thanks for having me here and thanks for chairing, Nam. This is actually joint work with Nam, who is chairing today. And we're looking at child overweight and obesity prevention or mitigation in Vietnam, urban Vietnam. So as you know, childhood obesity is rising across the world, and this poses real risks to healthcare financing. And this is in an interesting context because in countries like Vietnam, adult obesity is extremely low. I mean, Vietnam has probably the lowest obesity rate in the world at 2%. But in urban areas, we see an explosive trend, especially among school children in cities such as Ho Chi Minh City. About a half of children are thought to be overweight or obese at the moment. Now, if you look at the risk factors, of course, they're the standard ones related to that trend at the individual level: physical exercise, nutrition literacy, but also the food environment. But there are also some more specific factors to Vietnam and other countries in the region, which are preferences for overweight or chubby children, as you can see from this quote here, where a lot of parents want to have overweight children. And you can explain this by, a long period of undernutrition, and also, of course, periods of civil war and deprivation. Now, in this context, what we wanted to do is to update, in this kind of context of the nutrition transition, update information sets of parents and test whether an information intervention can help improve intermediate outcomes, but also ultimate outcomes that we care about, especially anthropometric outcomes. And there's really not a lot of evidence on these kinds of interventions at the, let's say, family level for developing countries. We're also testing a kind of relatively novel nudge, I would say, an integrated nudge. And we're also leveraging relatively precise anthropometric measurements such as body fat in percent, which are rarely collected in developing countries. And we're also looking at some long-term evidence of this intervention that we developed together with the Nutrition Center in Ho Chi Minh City. So we worked with the leading nutrition center in Ho Chi Minh City, and they had already in place a phone counseling for parents on, what's a healthy nutrition for their children. And we wanted to make this more effective, and we did so in two kind of main ways. We leveraged healthy conversation techniques. So instead of just providing information to parents, we kind of created opportunities to discuss health behaviors, use open discovery questions, and ultimately we wanted to kind of get to some kind of goal setting. So the parents, together with the nutritionist, committed to some goals. They wrote them down on a form, such as, decreasing sugary drinks. They wrote them down on a form and then signed off on it. It's a soft commitment. Nothing would happen if they didn't follow it, but this was leveraging some behavioral mechanisms that you can see on the slide here. In addition, we also gave parents weight scales and BMI report cards, and we reminded them of their goals that they had set earlier with the nutritionist. Now, we worked with 6 schools, and the randomization that was done at the individual level is 720 kids. And as you can see, we focused on only overweight or obese kids at baseline based on school records. Based on our data, we can say that Overweight rate and obesity rates are very elevated, especially also body fat percent is very high at 35%. In contrast to that, and that echoes the earlier quote that I showed you, 80% of parents think that their child's weight is actually healthy. So which is in stark contrast with some of the anthropometric measures that we have. We collected 3 types of data, anthropometric measurements at school, then we collected data from a snack choice experiment to look at child behavior, and we also did parental surveys at baseline and in follow-up. For anthropometric measurements, we have a long-term follow-up after 22 months after the intervention. Let me just jump into the main results. What we find is that the intervention worked very well among girls. So 6 months after the intervention, the girls' anthropometric measurements improved by about 0.2 standard deviations if you look at the average effect, which is driven by reductions in BMI and overweight probability, as well as body fat percent reductions. We don't see any changes among boys, and it's actually a 0 effect. When you look at the long-term effect, so 22 months later, these effects among girls persist, especially when it comes to body fat and percent, and also the overall effect on all of these measures that you see here. So the effect didn't really go down, only suggestively so. Now, we also have a conceptual framework to look at some of the mechanisms, and we find that the anthropometric changes that we see, especially among girls, are driven by changes in diets that we see reported in the parental survey. But we don't see any updates on the perceptions whether the weight itself is healthy. So that seems to be something we have to tackle in future work. We also don't see that the intervention changed children's behaviors measured by a snack choice experiment. So to sum up, we find very much like other studies that it's easier to change anthropometric outcomes of girls that are overweight or obese, but there are these kind of strong social norms that seem to be a barrier. And overall, soft commitments could help, and the intervention was very lightweight and cheap, and could lead to a substantial amount of cost savings per year in a city like Ho Chi Minh City. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Marit, Matthias, and I now looking forward to your comments.
Thank you. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, but I must say I was impressed with the paper. You have managed to collect a very rich data set, and you're very diligent in your analysis. I have 3 comments. One is for clarification, the other one is suggestion, and the third one I think is more kind of a point for general discussion. My point for clarification is about the treatment uptake. It's not completely clear to me how many, because you say the treatment is that parents were offered a package of interventions, and it's not very clear how many accepted it, and also how was it offered? Was it really a package that you got a consultation, and then when you had a consultation you got the scale, and you got the BMI report card? Because at some point you say that 80% report having received the weight scale, but only 60% participated in a nutritional consultation. So I was just wondering, does that mean that actually 80% at least participated, and then a part of those just forgot they had the consultation, or how did that work? So that's my first question. The second is about your knowledge indicators. You use knowledge about vegetables needed each day in grams and calories and fruits, and then you take the log of these values and then claiming like more is better, because you say, well, it's basically to capture if parents were made aware that higher intakes are better, and not necessarily to look at the total amounts. But I was wondering, I mean, if I'm a parent and I say, well, they need 1 kilogram of vegetables per day, is that necessarily better than if I would say 400 grams or 300 grams, right? So shouldn't you just take an indicator like a binary indicator? And especially for calories, there's definitely an optimal, right? It's not that less is always better or more is always better. So I was wondering if you could play around a bit with these indicators, and then maybe you do get some outcomes, because right now you find no effect on knowledge, and that could be because of your indicator choice. And then my final very broad question for discussion, so maybe you can't answer it now, is this really the way forward? On page 10, you say that much of the variation in stunting can be explained by health and disease environments that call for public investments, while overweight and obesity are more strongly linked to individual risky health behaviors and dietary choices, perceptions, and social norms, and lend themselves to pro-health individual and behavioral interventions. Put that very bluntly, if you're fat, it's your own fault and you should do something about it yourself. And I don't think I agree with that. And I don't think it's a helpful starting point. I think in general, these behavioral change interventions, and I've researched them myself, so I do exactly the same thing as you did. But I think there are some effects, but they're kind of small to moderate at best. And shouldn't we focus more on changing the food environment instead of putting blame on individual people and having them change their environment, or change their decisions instead of kind of manipulating the environment? Those were my main comments.
Thank you, Merit. We have 1 more minute for Matthias to respond. You want to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Marit, for reading the paper. These are excellent comments. I think indeed we have, on your second point, we have to look in depth more into the knowledge questions. Maybe something is there. So we pre-registered it, but now we can explore it a little bit more, I think. On your first point, you know, we didn't force parents to uptake the treatment, and so it's an intent to treat analysis. And what we do find is that, you know, a little bit more than half of parents participated in the consultation. What happened with the weight scale, you know, they were sent to parents' home. Maybe Nam can comment more on this, but not all of them seem to, you know, remember that they received them or did receive them, in fact. So we have to investigate this in more detail. And on your final point on the environment, yeah, I think the environment is changing so rapidly. At the same time, there are some kind of social norms that are kind of, that I highlighted that I think lend themselves to behavioral change interventions. So the environment is changing very rapidly, and that's hard to tackle, but there's some social norms, I think, that can be tackled with individual interventions. Thank you, Marit.
Yeah. Thanks, Matthias. Now, Chang, your turn. Yeah, please show your screen.
Okay. Can you see? Okay. There you go. Just do this. Right. So, everyone, my name is Jiang. I come from Wageningen University, and I'm presenting my research on nudging towards healthier food choice for children using information and cognitive dissonance. And this is joint work with my supervisor, Alan de Brouw from IFPRI, and Marit van den Berg from Wageningen University. So for introduction, Matthias in the previous presentation already gave you a background of Vietnam. So I just wanted to zoom in one particular unhealthy behavior among Vietnamese, which is excessive sugar consumption. So on average, Vietnamese consumes almost double the daily intake of sugar recommended by World Health Organization. And from our baseline, among the children in our sample from 12 schools in Do Anh district in Hanoi, which is very urban Vietnam, children are 10 times more likely to drink sweetened milk as snacks compared with plain milk. So the idea of our intervention to help correct this behavior is to use cognitive dissonance. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, cognitive dissonance involves the internal discomforts that individuals experience when their beliefs and attitudes are in conflict with their actual actions and behaviors. And because of this conflict, individuals can be motivated to change their behaviors to be in line with their beliefs and attitudes. And there's a scarcity of research on cognitive dissonance in influencing healthy food behavior. And this is something that we are interested in trying. In particular, we want to use the hypocrisy paradigm, and how it's used in practice involve 2 steps that I will explain in later slides. So for this paper, we evaluate whether the dissonance arousal nudge improves the use upon information provision. So to briefly summarize the experimental design, so our samples involve 136 classrooms of 12 schools in peri-urban Hanoi. So that would be about over 1,200 students aged 10 to 12 years old. And the data and the experiments was conducted concurrently with an online survey of a school-based RCT on fruit and vegetable consumptions. And we randomized at the cluster level. So we randomized the classroom into three groups: control, treatment 1, and treatment 2. So what do we do exactly in each group? So for the control group, the students just watch a placebo video about traffic safety. For the treatment 1, what we call information intervention, the children watch an animated educational video about cutting down sugar in their diet. And on the slide, you can see a snapshot from the video. And then for the treatment 2, which is information plus hypocrisy inducement. So the 2 steps here is in the first step, after watching the video, the children would recite what they learned from the video. And they were told that the message would be sent to children in other schools to promote healthy eating. So in this way, the children enforce the norm of eating healthier. Okay, and in the second step, they will be reminded of their own behavior. So they have to answer a brief set of simple questions about their habits with sweetened foods. For example, do you usually select water over soft drinks during meals? And to measure the behavioral outcome, we offer children a gift after they answer the questionnaire of the other bigger RCT study. And to thank you for joining the study, they could select one of the 3 milks. So one is unsweetened, sweetened milk, or reduced sugar milk. We're also interested in seeing how the effect of the intervention may erode after some time. So in half of the schools, the children made a meal choice immediately after watching the video. And the other schools, after going through the procedures of hypocrisy inducement, they were occupied with another task, which was answering the questionnaires of the other school survey. And then they could make the food choice. So the treatment effects estimation was very simple. So the outcome, which is a binary variable of unhealthy options or healthier options. And we included on the right-hand side on the treatment variables, the delay and the interactions. We also include a school and grade fixed effects. So the results, I have uploaded a longer presentation so you can see it. But for this is the standard balance check. Things look fine. And from the classroom level summary, you can see that there's no big difference between treatment 1, which is only information, and treatment 2 with the hypocrisy added. And interestingly, we find that the delay, the questionnaire, seems to have a positive effect on meal selection of the control group. And here it's the results from the regression results. So so both treatments increase the likelihood of children selecting healthier milk, and this effect declined with a delay. And yeah, either with or without a delay, the effects did not differ between 2 treatment groups. And we also see again the main effect of the delay. So the questionnaire increased the likelihood of children selecting healthier milk. So what can we say from this? I'm trying to find this one. Okay, so we observed no significant difference between 2 treatments. So guilt tripping using hypocrisy inducement is not necessary. And the information by itself was enough to nudge children toward healthier choice. And the information video was very cheap to make, can be adapted to different contexts. And in our case, it's the advantage is did not have to be delivered by an authority figures, for example, teachers, to be effective. In this study, an interesting point I want to focus on is the concurrent implementation of this research. with the NLI data collection of a larger study has some important implications. The good thing is the bigger context acted as a guide for the true intention of our study to measure behavioral outcome. So it helps to reduce potential social desirability bias and experimental demand bias. But on the other hand, the questionnaire, which is intended as a filler task, could have acted as a priming device or a substitute for our information treatment and reduce the main treatment effects. So yeah, we in this research we try to minimize experimental demand effects by trying to minimize pressure from peers, and then the delay acts as a valve for the experimental objective. But for future research, it would also be very interesting to get more explanations for the lack of effect of hypocrisy inducement. So like I explained before, information alone was probably sufficient to push the children towards corrective actions, or the children could have found other means to resolve the cognitive dissonance, such as they try to forget it, or they get distracted because they are children. And it would be great if we could have expert measure of belief and attitude, or a measure of internal discomfort or the guilt for the children, so that we know that the cognitive dissonance that actually worked. So that's bring me to the end of this presentation. Thank you, and I look forward to the comments. Yeah.
I would like to invite Margarita for comments.
Well, thank you very much, Tran. It was a pleasure to read your paper. There's a lot of new stuff that I learned, and I think it's again a great contribution to this scarce literature in developing countries on food choices. I didn't prepare slides, so for the sake of the time, I just have one comment, which you probably don't need to reply, maybe just to give a bit of time to think about that, and two questions. For the comment, I was just wondering about your theoretical framework, and I thought maybe it would be great to on top of talking about beliefs and attitude, also talk about children preferences, which may be at the end something that drives the choice. And I also thought that you discussed the previous intervention on increased consumption of fruit and vegetables, which was done in the same schools, the same children, in your final section. But I think maybe you should put something about it also close to your theoretical frameworks, because indeed it may somehow prime children, and also, even though the experimental demand effects could be low, but it still could somehow tell them what you expect them to do at the end, right? And I also thought about the gift. So the choice was actually framed as a gift, and I thought maybe it's also something that can tell children, okay, it's a gift. You can, please yourself. Take something that you like. Related, I was wondering, making the recording with children somehow also can induce some sort of a stress on them. This is also can be somehow, making noise in your treatment. But it's just the thoughts. And the two questions, I was wondering, these anonymous answers that you collect after inducing dissonance in children, they drop in the box. Do you link them to the IDs of children? Can you reuse them? So I was just thinking that maybe there is something you can find there. And the second question, do children really understand the content, sugar content of the milk that they drink? Or they choose it by just preferred brand, or they, sometimes children pick things that they're colored in a certain way. So then they probably don't know what they're actually drinking. And then when you put this plain, similar looking different type of milks with the labels on boxes saying like it's a low content, these labels actually, I thought that they may also work as nudges, right? Telling children this milk is low sugar, so you should take it. Just a question. So I was wondering if somehow it can help to, to maybe, do some additional stuff in the paper. Yeah, thank you very much again. Great job.
Yeah, thank you a lot for the comment. That's super helpful. Do I have time to respond to any of them right now?
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's really important point about the RCT. I was very hesitant to make the role of the RCT bigger in the paper, because it's good, you know, it's there's a lot of implications, and also it's not like what we pre-registered, but it seems that it comes back often. So yeah, I think that we just have to be to put more focus on it, because I think in practice, this is something that PhD students also do a lot. Like we do several small interventions on top of the others. So it's good that we discuss things in together. And about and you took something about the gift. So I think, so yes, it makes sense that because it's a gift that they can choose what they like. But then it's kind of like work against our intervention in a way, right? So yeah, so that I would definitely take that and then discuss it during discussion. And about the stress that they may experience, this is something that we've found it very hard to try to measure, or this is something that we did during the pilot, right? So we would ask the children if did they have any stress, or did you feel any cognitive, like really strong bad feeling about themselves, because we also want our research to be ethical, and it did not seem to be the case. But yeah, but I would really appreciate if future research can find a way, a non like invasive way to check if the children are under stress or under cognitive dissonance. Yeah, but overall super helpful comments, and I will try to incorporate into my paper. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Last but not least, now Margarita.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, so the paper I'm presenting here, snacks, nudges, and asymmetric peer influence, is a joint effort. So it's a teamwork with two my supervisors, Matthias and Robert, which are here in the room, and two our Indonesian co-authors, Rina Agustin and Erfi Profiantini from University of Indonesia and Human Nutrition Research Center in Jakarta. So I will skip the motivation, as so basically it's the same. We're facing the low and middle income countries facing nutrition transition. The same patterns we observe in Indonesia. Again, children are living, well, again, the country is living in a double burden of malnutrition situation. And again, as Matthias said, for Vietnam, the same we see here in Indonesia. Parents are less obese, and obesity among children is growing substantially. And again, experimental evidence is quite scarce. So our paper basically makes three contributions. So we, first of all, we add to the literature on food choices in children and nudges in the context of developing country, which actually difficult to say whether the evidence that we have from developed countries, high income countries, can be generalized there. We evaluate the influence of a cognitive nudge, so-called emoji labels, that may trigger children to choose healthier foods. And we do it together with exploring the influence of the peer behavior or the peer choices, or which can actually nudge away children from their healthier choices. And in the paper, we revisit again the issue of information efficiency. As Frank said before, we're studying heterogeneities of these treatment effects in two different informational environments. So we conduct lab in the field experiments with more than 1,600 children of 6 to 13 years old in public primary schools in central Jakarta. Children in our experiments were given a choice of snack, and they had to choose between healthy banana and a healthy cookie. So just go to the pictures. And we have 4 treatment arms. As you see in the picture on the left, this is the control condition, banana and a cookie. We have first treatment condition is the emoji labels, which are attached to the tray and presented to the child. And we have 2 peer treatment, the positive and negative peer. So basically children, you can see it in the 3rd and the 4th picture, children see their classmates. These are our confederate, the boy to matched with a girl, also the boy matched with a boy, or girl matched with a girl, the same age children from the same class, who exited the room either with banana or chocolate cookie. And then the child comes into the room and she or he will observe the same tray as in control conditions, so no labels. Additionally to treatment, we block children. We actually provide children with information, blocking them on groups. So each group of 4 children, half of the sample was exposed to the video, and in the video additional treatment, some children in groups of 4 could see the video that we produced for them, and the video was featuring the My Plate type of materials, talking about healthy diets and the role of unhealthy sweets in the diet. So this figure shows just the flow of experimental procedure that we had. I'll not stay on that. And after this, after children were individually made choice in the snack room, they were expedited to the quiz room when they answered some questions. So our main results are shown on this figure. Just to tell briefly, the first 4 columns is the no video condition, and then the last 4 columns on the right is a treatment effect among children who saw the video. So on average, 60%, like 6 out of 10 children in our experiment preferred banana to chocolate cookie. As you compare column 1 and column 5, we see that's 21% more children. If you compare column 1 and 2, chosen a healthy snack with an emoji label. At the same time, if you compare column 1 and 5, you see this is the video effect, which is the 33% more children preferred banana to chocolate cookie when they saw the video. This is the video effect. And if you compare column 1 and 4 or 5 and 8, this is the decline in preference and the choice of banana because of observing unhealthy eating peer. So just to add, yes, our sample gender balanced, and we also aligned it with Indonesian national census data. All right, on top of the providing just the basic effect of our experiment, we also explore some related mechanisms. So first mechanisms is we explore the taste versus health. We ask children in a quiz whether they think fruits are healthy, tasty, and what are the reasons for of them choosing a particular snack. What we discovered is that fruits are actually healthy, and children are aware about that, but was not a reason for choosing them as a snack in control condition. We see that the emoji labels do not change children's reasoning for choosing a snack, and it goes in line with the nudge per se, which is supposed to generate automatic take up. We see that's positive. The peer eating healthy, the choice of peer with banana doesn't really increase benefits for children to choose a healthy snack. And we see that those children who saw the unhealthy eating peer, they mention healthiness of fruits even less. The second mechanism that we explore the expectations. The children were asked what they think their mothers, teachers, and the peers, mothers and teachers will pick for them, and their peers will pick for themselves. So we find that the negative peer treatment drives children to deviate from their teachers' and mothers' expectations of an appropriate snack choice. All right, to conclude, we conclude that emoji label may stimulate a healthy choice at the individual level, but it has a relatively small effect, and it cannot be overcome with information provision. At the same time, we conclude that the negative peer effect on children's food choices is very large, and it's more pronounced among overweight children. That's what trace and complier tracking. And it may override social expectations and eating norms that we present to children in the educational video, and as well as nudges. And again, negative peer effect cannot be overcome with informational provision. We also provide some qualitative evidence that the educational information can work and can increase children's deliberate choice of healthier foods. Well, our main outcome of this study is that we talk about that small modification in the choice architecture nudges probably are not enough in the given context to change children's food preferences, and the more paternalistic measures such as bans or taxes and taking away unhealthy foods from school grounds should be needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, perfect. Thank you, Margarita. So discussion for Margarita, Alan. So go ahead, Alan.
Thank you. Well, thanks again, Margarita, Matthias, and Robert for inviting me to read the paper and provide some feedbacks. So I really enjoy the reading it. I think it poses a very important question related with the situation and policy challenge that we're facing in Indonesia, particularly as you said that we're facing like a double burden, malnutrition, stunting on one hand, and then overweight and obesity on the other hand. I found also the experiment is well designed, and the setup I think it's properly implemented, and I don't find in the paper that you faces actually major issues in implementing the design. Some results interesting, the importance of on the emoji video, but also on the negative peer influence that I think to your policy implication. So I have two comments. One related with the the experiment design and content. So one is I found that I think it's good that you did the balance test on the child gender, age, height, weight, parental education, and work status. But also, I think if possible, because I saw that in the paper that you also did a background survey that collect information among others is on the dietary preference. So whether it's possible actually to conduct like a balance test on the preference toward this preference. Particularly, I'm a little bit concerned that if the preference is not balanced, and for instance, it is leaning actually to the unhealthy snack, so that may bias actually the results. But at the same time, that may also explain why negative peer effects actually dominate the other effects. And as I think I can see in the paper, that's the negative peer have like a very negative, very big effect compared to the emoji and then the information provisions. I would argue that also the balance test might be also needed to for factors variable proxying level of the household well-being. Also, I think it's important also to I don't find in the paper the duration actually the time to wait in between the rooms in between the experiment stages, because I think since some of the information for example like video, that might actually need some like deliberate thinking to for the subject actually to digest the information. So I'm not sure actually how long between the subject the children actually show the video and then move to the snack room to pick up the snack, because I think that time matters is actually for the children to digest the information from the video. The second one is on the regression. On the specification, I found that I think it's perhaps also important to proxy the control for the variables via the proxy household well-being. In addition, I think I saw that you control for like a level of the parental education. But if possible, if you have the variables, I think it's also important to control for the any variables proxying from the household well-being to control for the household resources that might associate with snacking habit within the family. Again, the result interesting, but for me there are some puzzles. Is actually how to interpret the size and the sign that that link between the results from the effects of the emoji, the negative peer with the video. Because I think once you control for the video, then the effect of the emoji that's supposed to be complementary, it's becoming smaller. And on the other hand, once you control for the information provision, the effect for the negative peer is actually becoming more negative. So to me, this is a bit like a counterintuitive. But I found also like a potential explanation. I found actually in the video, I watched the video myself in Bahasa directly. So I found while the main message of the video actually it's about the healthy food, vegetables and fruit, and then what is actually considered the unhealthy food. But at the end, it says actually in the video that it is fine to consume the snack occasionally. So I find this is like an ambiguous message that might affect actually the decision of when the children actually pick up the snack in the next room. I think that's my comment. Again, thank you for having me to provide the text to the paper.
Thank you so much, Ilan. It's very helpful. Thanks a lot for your comments and also for engaging with our paper. I can, if I have a couple of seconds, just to, indeed answer some of these comments. Some of them we will need to look more details. Yes, we do conduct the parental survey, and we measure something that may stay for the well-being, maybe parental income, and also some food consumption within households that we can look at. For sure, about the timing of implementation, yes, we were taking children from classroom in group of 4, and we were showing them video, which was approximately 2.5 minutes, and then one by one, they would be brought to the snack room, which was just next door, right? So they were just in the corridor watching video, and then, so probably the delay was very small, and I agree that probably children will needed more time to digest this information still, and probably as what Tran observed in her paper, the effect would be different with some delay. This is something that we probably need to consider next time when we run something similar. Yeah, and I agree with this puzzling. Yes, we see this information doesn't enhance our nudges, and also we see this bigger negative effect if children saw video, and indeed maybe it's because children think like, okay, if my classmate eats the snacks, so I'm also allowed to take unhealthy stuff. That's why also we think that's the effect of the positive peer of a guy or girl who is eating banana. It also doesn't make children to choose banana. Well, the effect is very, very tiny. So probably also because they think like, okay, so that's what they expect, and I still can, deviate and eat whatever I want. So yes, indeed, it's very helpful to look at the more details. Sure.
Thank you, Margarita. So I would like to open up the floor to comments and questions. We have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I see here in the chat box, the first question from Linus Spencer. Can you unmute yourself and ask Juan Carlos, right? Yeah.
Hi everyone, sorry about that. I was a bit slow in getting my video on then. Yes, I'll ask the question, and thank you for a very interesting set of presentations. It's really important subject matter, obviously, because obesity is a massive problem worldwide. So very interested in this topic. So the question was, I was wondering if the same pattern of high BMI of the grandchildren living with their grandparents would be found in the UK, and has anybody done any sort of research on that, or is it more of a cultural phenomenon in Chile based on something that happened in the past, similar to what people were talking about, what happened in Vietnam with the famines and the wars? Did anything similar happen in Chile? Because I don't really know that much Chilean history, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I did provide some feedback. My assessment, working with data from the US and from the UK and from other countries, even in Africa, every time that you have a big increase in female labor participation because the economy is expanding and there are more opportunities, you start to have this imbalance between intra-household time allocation, opportunities for formal childcare, and then the involvement of extended families. And it really depends on cultural factors to some extent, especially in this idea of bargaining. But ultimately, in the countries where you see that there is this gap, especially after work, where the children have to be somewhere between the time the school ends and the work ends, you start seeing this pattern. I don't know how it is in Europe, but in Chile, for example, most schools end about an hour or 2 hours before parents get at work. So you have sometimes, if it's a good school, after class activities, you can complement, but in most public schools, you have this huge gap in terms of time and structure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can tell in Wales, we have lots of after-school clubs, and my daughter attended after-school clubs for years until COVID happened. And now I live, you know, in my village, and the school is right over the road. So she comes home straight after school, but she comes in and she makes snacks. And, you know, I don't really look what she's doing because I'm usually in a meeting like this, so I don't know what she's eating. But yeah, I think that's a big thing, isn't it? But, and especially what you were saying about the double portions of food, because nobody's coordinating. Oh, so the grandmother might say, I'll make him a snack, and then the mother comes in, oh, I'll make you a snack. You know, it's not coordinated. And that is an interesting point in itself, isn't it? That's something that we could educate parents and grandparents about, isn't it?
I don't want to get too far into this, but we did a thought experiment to see whether the kids lie, and I'm saying this like lie very softly, to the grandparents in terms of whether they got meals at school. And a big fraction of kids, they just say, when they're asked, do you eat at school? No, even though they have the meal at school. So there is a lot of space here for bargaining and to understand a little bit more the intra-household decision-making process.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much, Joanne, and thank you for the link as well that you sent in the direct messages. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias, you have two questions, one from Marcos and the other from Fabrice. Now I would like to invite Marcos first.
Yeah, Matthias, a very simple question. I'm wondering if, because I think the goal setting was done by the parents. I'm wondering if you are comparing that with other studies like this one from Anya Samik, where the goal setting part was done by the kids. I know you have more long-term outcomes and way more outcomes than them, but I'm wondering how can you compare that with the kid doing the goal setting as compared to the parent doing that?
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I think Nam and I, we have to look into that and compare that more directly. The main thing I don't remember if they also had the soft commitment parts. I think that's kind of the main thing that's driving our findings, I think.
And we didn't have the goal setting for right? Yeah, just for parents. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the input.
Yeah, and Fabrice from Paris School, can you unmute yourself and ask? You are not here, right? One question for you, Matthias, in the chat box, because the person who asked this one is not here. So I read this. How do you interpret the gender difference? One possibility is that your intervention just make Western international social norms of body shapes more silent, and these norms are more stringent towards girls, women than boys, men.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just answer quickly, but Nam, you can add maybe because you're the expert on the context. our intervention wasn't targeted in body norms or anything. It was really just about, what is healthy to eat. And if your child is obese, you might not giving, the right amount of food and, enough physical exercise. So I think the Western norms are present everywhere in all of these countries. So I'm not sure about that, but now you might have another answer.
Yeah, we don't have any differences between men and boys in our intervention. But I guess girls have more affected by the fact that perhaps their parents, like mom, they just have more care on the girls' body shape, something like that, and the impact going to that channels. Yeah, but we don't have the clear evidence on that. We just guess.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, this is a question for Matthias. And, you were talking about the soft commitments and the goal settings, or setting goals. Did they have to write those down, or did they just have to say them, or did they put them on websites somewhere? How was that done?
Yeah, so they, after the consultation with the nutritionist, there was a form that they were, offered. They didn't have to do it, and they could write down, 2, 3, 4 goals. And then the nutritionist and the parent signed on the form with the date, and then that was it. And then they got a reminder later on about their goals. But that was the process. Now that's correct, right? That's the way we did it.
And that's so. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah.
So I was just going. I'm not sure who's supposed to be talking now, but yeah. So I was just wondering if you got back to those goals at like 6 months or 12 months or something, and see what actually happened.
So we kind of do it indirectly by having some secondary outcomes, looking at the kind of diets and see if there are any self-reported dietary changes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And there's some consistent evidence. So many of them committed to reducing sugary drinks for their children, and that we see some evidence for that this is happening, at least self-reported way. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Chang, you have a question from Emma. Emma is not here, right? So she asked you, what was age range of sample?
Yeah, I think I already answered the question to Emma
yes.
and Linux in the chat. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So we don't have any questions remain in the chat, but we still have several minutes. In the Indonesian food choice experiment, Margarita, you have data on anthropometric, right? But you do not utilize that one, right? In the paper.
No, we do actually. We actually look at the compliance with treatment among children with different weight status. So yes, we do. We actually find out that those children who were overweight or obese, they actually take more unhealthy, make more unhealthy choices. Yes, yes, we do. Yeah.
I am thinking about the food choice. The subjects in your experiment is one banana and the other one is the pie, right?
Yeah,
but in food choice, she has only milk, like milk with sugar or without sugar or less sugar. So the food in your experiment, I'm thinking about a series of food choice experiment because for kids, you know, in the first choice, she or he may pick banana, but in the next one, she pick pie. In the other next, she picks, she come back to banana, like a balance in. If you have a series of choice, it will come to a balance between banana and pie. I'm thinking about that.
Yes, indeed. We did, we did a pilot before because we also wanted to find out which pair of snacks gives us better variation. So, and then we, yeah, and it was almost 50-50. So it was like 60-40. And then in our experiment, we saw like proportion was otherwise like reverse. So yeah, that could be, if we do it repeated food choice, yeah, we could find that's probably they like both. Then.
No, because I'm thinking about the policy recommendation from your study, because at the end you will advise that okay, we can use this nudge or the peer effect or the video information provision to influence the choice, but that is only one choice. But if you make it like a series of choice, you don't need to intervene anything. It go to the, because you know, the kids cannot eat banana all time, cannot eat pie all times, something like that.
Yeah, it's good comment indeed. Yes, we thought about nudges, how if we label foods, well, in the school canteen, for example, on the vendors, and then incentivize children to go there and buy. But the problem was what we discovered, actually the social influence is so strong. So whatever we do, they will still follow what the peers choose. And then, yeah, so probably we need to work on the environment first, rather than trying to move children from one snack to another. Yeah, but thanks. It's a very good observation. Yes.
Okay, Matthias, you have any points?
I think we're getting kicked out soon. So I want to thank you, Nam, for chairing so well. It's not an easy task, and you did it super well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, all contributors, for putting this together. I think it is a great section. So very coherent, right, Matthias and everyone, and thanks all for your excellent presentations, comments, and questions. Very good opportunity for us who is working on similar topics, and I really hope that from this seminar we will have more chances to do joint work, and hope to see you soon at some point. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.